Hello and welcome to Carnivorist Chats. My name is James, your host. I started this podcast to help other folks share their own healing stories and to interview thought leaders and experts in the carnivore, keto, and low oxalate space. Before we begin, I'd like to give a shout out to Equip Foods and the Carnivore Bar. As an affiliate, you can use the link in the show notes to get a discount on their products when you check out using the code Carnivorist. Thanks in advance for listening, subscribing, and any likes or shares. And now, on with the podcast. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Carnivorist Chats. It's James, your host. We are back for the final quarter of season 3. And what a way to start it off. I have a wonderful lady who's agreed to join me on Carnivorist Chats today to share her journey with oxalates and histamines and all kinds of things that we share in common. Welcome, Decedra Apgar, to Carnivorist Chats. It's such a pleasure to have you on.
Hi, James. Thank you so much for having me today. It's great to be here.
The pleasure is all mine. Folks and listeners that are tuning into this, we're going to get into oxalates. We're going to get into all kinds of things on Decedra's journey. And I just wanted to say that she had reached out to me to come on here to be able to share her journey. And I so appreciate her for doing that. And I know you will too, because hers, like mine, we just discussed offline, share so many similar things in our journey. It's uncanny. And it's such a powerful tool to be able to share, isn't it, Decedra? And I remember, and you know my stories, that I found podcasts, and that's how I connected with Sally when I was at my sickest. So it's come full circle here for the both of us now to be able to share this journey. And I'm just, again, so thankful for having you on.
Well, I appreciate so much, James, the work. And like you said, the work that you do, and like Sally and Michael and others who are really helping get the word out about oxalates, because it's not well known, but it is so important to know about. So
absolutely it is, and transformed and is transforming both you and I's lives. And again, thank you to Sally Norton, who I've had on the podcast, and thank you to Monique Attinger, who is an absolute gem as well, for getting the word out about oxalates. Decedra, let's dive right in. I know that your health, and thank you for sending me your bio in advance and understanding the journey you've gone through, is that your health went off a cliff in 2019. But I'd like to start from the beginning. If you could just give the listeners a little bit of a background on where you are now and where you were coming up, and sort of what happened in your formative years. Were there any signs that maybe your health was not going on the trajectory you had hoped?
So if you going back, I can remember allergies starting about the age of 8. We had just moved to a new home, and now, like we've discussed, when you look back, once you have this knowledge about oxalates and toxicity and all these things, you can look back through a different lens, and you can see things that you didn't know at the time. But we just moved into a new home. And so now I think about the toxicity aspect of all of those chemicals that are in there, right? And then that's when a lot of my issues started, as well as just the emotional stress that was going on at that time. And I had, like we discussed, some other things that can be indicative of oxalate toxicity, which are like hiccups. I had hiccups all the time, and I didn't know why. It just started around that time period. Same thing with styes and dropping stuff. I dropped stuff so much, and it's like, why is she so clumsy? Why is she always dropping things? So, and like I said, I just thought it was normal at that point in time. And as I got older, my allergies did progressively incorporate more and more things, right? I was becoming allergic to more things. And I was 13. Yeah, when I was 13, I started on antibiotics. So in my family, we did everything, traditionally. So if you had a problem, you went to the doctor. So the dermatologist started me on a daily routine of antibiotics for teenage acne. So I was cycling back and forth between tetracycline and erythromycin. And so again, like looking back through the lens of, what we know now, that just, decimated my gut basically. And, definitely was not good for things in the future. And we did ask the doctor, or is this okay? And of course, he just was mistaken. He was doing the best he could. And, the knowledge wasn't necessarily there at that time. This was, back in the 80s. And so we thought it was okay. We were reassured it was okay. If I knew then what I know now, right? Oh, I would have never done it. But anyway, my allergies progressed further. So by the time I was my mid-20s, I started on allergy shots, and I did those for about 6 years. They they weren't really helping, but they said sometimes, it takes time. So I kept doing them. After about 6 years, I went in for my allergy shot one day. I got 3 shots twice a week. After they administered the shots, they require you to stay, just to make sure everything's okay. And this particular time, I started feeling funny. I started itching. My face started turning red. Hives started developing, and I started coughing. And I I said something. I said, I'm having trouble like breathing. I'm having trouble getting air. And so once I said that, then, everything really escalated at that point. They really started stepping up, and like they basically got it under control with epinephrine. So they were able to stop the reaction, but it was very unnerving because it felt like, at least to me, it felt like invisible hands choking me. And so you can't, if someone is actually choking, you can try and pull the hands off. You couldn't do anything. And so the doctor, my allergist told me that it's not a matter of if this would happen again, but when. And so from that point on, I carried an EpiPen. For years, I carried an EpiPen. It didn't actually happen again, except for that same day. By the time they sent me home, I had like a small, like, second round. But we were able to stop it. And so that, though, changed forever how I looked at hives, and how I thought about that. And so to move forward to present day, there are other things that I'll come back to, but that came into play because when I first got really sick 5 years ago, it started with hives. And so I just woke up one morning and had large, like, swathes of hives, like areas of hives all over me. And of course, anybody who's had hives, it itches profusely, and the more you scratch it, the worse it gets. So you try not to scratch it. And so I called my allergist because I just thought, okay, well, we'll start there. So I did look up, though, because when you want to find out what's wrong, you do your own research. And I saw in there about histamine intolerance, and I was like, huh. It made me start thinking, I wonder if I could have that. I don't know. So when we went into the appointment, I talked to the doctor. I told him, I said, I don't know. Could it be histamine intolerance? He's like, no. He said, you're fine. We're just gonna give you some medicine. It'll be fine. So take your Zyrtec, take your prednisone. Yeah, you're good. So I'm like, okay. So I went home and I took the medication, and I had actually reacted before to prednisone. With hives. They had given it to me once before, but I was like, well, that was a long time ago, So the hives got worse. The Zyrtec and the prednisone did not help at all. If anything, it felt like it did make it worse, which had me concerned because, of course, then that's when my mind immediately goes back to the anaphylaxis that happened, years earlier. And so I became concerned because the hives are getting worse, and now I'm getting them every day. At what point does it reach that threshold and it turns into another anaphylaxis reaction? I didn't go back to that doctor. I started searching. Like I was like, I really just need to get the root cause of this. I really need to find out what's causing this, not start on more medication, because I had been over my life, because of my allergies and other issues, I had been on a lot of medication. For example, part of that is when I was 32, I was diagnosed with endometriosis, which is an autoimmune, painful autoimmune condition. I had been struggling with a lot of pain for like 20 years related to the endometriosis. I had, sought help from my doctors, but they were not able to really provide me good pain relief. And that really was the issue, was just the pain was not constant, but it came frequently, and you never knew when you were going to be in pain and when it would be disabling. And so that made, there was frustration around that, of course, and it was very difficult. So by the time I was 32, and that was the same time I had the anaphylactic reaction, and they discovered I had ovarian cysts, and they thought that might be contributing to the pain. So the doctor, he said the cyst was too large. I needed to have a laparotomy. So I had that's a major surgery to remove my right ovary, half of my left ovary, and fallopian tube, and then some adhesions. And it did not help. It things just got worse.
Decedra, this is unbelievable so far. I want to take just a pause and allow you to take a break for a second and just ask a couple of questions based on what you were talking to me about. So when you were in your younger years and first got diagnosed and were having these shots, allergy shots, what did they say you were allergic to? What was the shot protecting you against? Was it the typical pollen or food related? What was that all to help for?
It was primarily like environmental, like you say, like hay fever type stuff, but also like cats, dogs. I was even allergic to like roaches, and you're like, well, who has roaches? But they said, if you live in Florida, there are roaches around. Even if you keep a clean home, it's not related to that. It's just insects. And so I was allergic when they did. They do the whole 120. You're familiar, right?
Oh
Yes,
yes, and I was going to ask you. You must have had the battery of tests. Did you have the skin test? Did you have all
yes,
the blood work tests done as well?
yes,
I imagine
absolutely.
so.
Yes, all of that exactly. And they did it two separate times. Both times they're just, and it's on a scale of 1 to 5. And I had so many fives. I was allergic to so many things. And in fact, like the second time they did the test, I had progressed even further to the point that after they did the test, I became sick for like a week, just reacting to the test because they had put so many allergens in my system at one time. Basically, I I was allergic to just a ton of stuff. And so the shots were supposed to address, as many things as they could. They couldn't address food allergies. I did get tested separately later on for food allergies, and they did come back positive. Some things did, but they said if you do those tests, it's not always indicative that it's a true allergy. You kind of just have to remove it from your diet and then see, how are you affected. So
I'm sorry to see you. I
mm,
just want to say, I apologize again. Listening to everything else that you've had happen, and folks, you have to understand,
mm.
we haven't not even gotten to the stage with poor Decidra where her health went off a cliff. And Decidra, I am a fan of modern medicine now for trauma and, emergency trauma and repairing broken bones. But as far as digging to root cause healing, I can understand just hearing what your doctor said, you'll be fine, and sent you away, and you had that reaction. I just recall so many times being told the similar thing. No, it is not histamine intolerance. This is not, we don't need to test any further. You've just got this and it's all in your head. And nothing surprises me anymore. And I'm just sorry to hear that you had to, like myself, go further down the pain route before things start to become more clear to you, all puns intended with this allergy thing. So take us, and again, apologies for interrupting you. Take us to where we just left off. And, you were in the 30s and were in the throes of sort of this, again, finding out you had all these severe allergies to things.
Yes, no, I agree 100% with what you said. It's absolutely true. So what happened at that point, what I do need to back up for a second. There's another piece in there. So I mentioned to you so my husband and I've been married for 30 years, and I had struggled at the beginning of our marriage with miscarriage. So we do have one son. I have a son who's 25, and he was my fourth pregnancy. So I had three miscarriages prior to that, and after him, we had infertility because I could never get pregnant again. So he's such a blessing. So thankful for him. He's a wonderful son. Love him to death. Such a gift. But we did struggle with that too. And so after I had the first laparotomy, that first surgery, to help with the pain that it wasn't really addressing, they put me on birth control, which really was, there's just some irony there because it was the last thing I needed because we were struggling to get pregnant, so I definitely need to be on birth control. But that did bring me a measure of pain relief. So I stayed on that for 5 years. And of course, again, looking back through the lens, I see how bad that was for my gut. But, we were like our whole family, we just were raised that, if you had a problem, you go to the doctor. Right. And so it never like really even occurred to me to consider alternate routes. And so I was on that for 5 years. And at some point, I was like, I can't keep staying on this. I was having some other issues. And so I did go ahead and take myself off, but the pain just got unbearable. So I started looking for another doctor, who could help me with this. So I wound up going to a specialist. And so I was almost 42, and he said that he could get rid of the endometriosis. He could cut it all out. So we we made we drove up to Atlanta at Christmas time, and it was a big thing to do this. He wound up I did, just let me preface this, say I did ask him to please preserve as much ovarian tissue as possible. So I had at this point half of a left ovary, you know, left. Ultimately, after the surgery, he told me that my uterus was in very bad shape. And so, of course, he took my uterus, and my appendix was also in very bad shape. He did leave me a quarter of an ovary, so he took half of my half ovary, and actually, it's been a little train chugging along because it's taken care of me. I didn't have to go through like surgical menopause that happens, when all the ovarian tissue is removed. So I'm thankful for that. But I did have a lot of trouble healing. That was after they actually did the hysterectomy via laparoscopic or a laparoscopy. It was a laparoscopic procedure. They said you should be better in about 3 weeks. Well, and this is another oxalate thing, actually, because, Sally always talks about slow healing and all that. And it took me forever to heal. Even 8 months later, it still hurt to drive. And for the first several months, it was difficult to get out of bed. Anything I did, I suffered with pain the next day, and I'd be in bed most of that day. I kind of, after this point, this was really kind of a pivotal point in my health journey, because I kind of became disillusioned with, like you say, traditional medicine for the realm of chronic conditions, right? Like, I didn't mention this, but like I was in a severe car accident when I was 11. I fractured my skull. And so I have permanent nerve damage on top of my head with numbness and hypersensitivity in different areas. And they did a great job with that, and so that kind of thing, absolutely, I feel like they are, that's their wheelhouse, right? That's absolutely the area they shine. But chronic illness, I pretty much at this point, after this second surgery, the laparoscopic surgery, I said, I'm just done. Like, this is not working. Like, I still was having problems. It did decrease some of my pain, but I still was having so many other issues. And and this was prior. This is the point I was about 42 when I made this decision. And so I just started looking for like ways to get healthy. So I came across this article. This is a pastor's wife. She was talking about she developed a serious problem after she got married. And so it took like 4 years. Like, it truly was an answer to prayer for her husband, because her husband found out what it was. And all it turned out to be was just parabens. She was sensitive to parabens. And so she took those out of her, like, all of her lotions and all of her cosmetics, any products, any personal products she used, she made sure they were paraben free. And like, her problems went away in like a couple weeks. And so that gave me great encouragement. And I was just like, okay, you know what? I am going to look, maybe it's parabens for me, like, I'm just going to see what I can find.
So what I wanted to ask now is, you started investigating, and we agree upon the fact that, as you said, it's not really their wheelhouse in terms of modern medicine, these chronic conditions. Like myself, you started searching online and found some hope. You are 42, you just said, around this time.
Right.
And again, listeners, you have to understand, this is not even the point where Decedra's health really goes off the cliff. And I think this is a good juncture to take us now right into that March 2019 timeframe and explain to the listeners what transpired. Over to you, please. And thank you for sharing all this. It's really important because sometimes it's the smallest details that someone hears that can be the most helpful, especially if they're aligning with what you're talking about.
Oh, 100%, because I will get to that because I have a perfect example of that in what happened with my story. So going back to March of 2019, waking up those hives. So I already shared about how at that point I was looking for a functional medicine doctor now to really help me get to the root cause, right? Because I had learned enough over that time period so I was 47 at this point. So from 42 to 47, and I spent that time, trying to get healthier and doing all these things. So I knew I needed to get the root cause of it. So it was just difficult to find the right doctor. I did find one practitioner who put me on a paleo type diet and a lot of supplements and a lot of lifestyle changes and I did them, but I was getting worse. And I couldn't understand, I didn't even, I started looking for somebody else just because I thought my experience in talking with him was he was very committed to the fact that this was the correct path. And so I just decided I would look for another practitioner. So I found another practitioner, and she actually told me one of the issues was NSAIDs. I don't know. Okay, same. So she said, really, she's like, you're toxic. And I thought, I've thought about that since then so many times because it really is true. Like, she didn't know why I was toxic, but she did recognize that I was toxic. So she thought it might be mold, or there was Lyme, possibly, they explored that avenue, but there were just so many things that I just couldn't do everything. And so at any rate, she did give me some quercetin, which was successful in helping my hives to calm down. It calmed down my mast cells. And so that was beneficial. I did that for a period of time. But all throughout this time, what I didn't talk about was one of the major changes when I was taking food out, because I kept reacting to different foods, creating the hives, caused anxiety, insomnia. My insomnia was flaring. So I couldn't sleep. I was having trouble eating. I was anxious in part because of the history of anaphylaxis, but also there was just another part, like I didn't even know what was causing the anxiety. Like, it was there all the time. And like I had tinnitus. It was like alarm bells going off in my head, like a 3 alarm fire. And all those things were there. Well, the other piece of it was, I believe my thyroid was also acting up at the same time because I'm 5'4" and I was about 115 pounds. I lost 8 pounds that first week that the hives started because of the eating issues and then something changing with my thyroid. And I've always had a healthy appetite, but this was like I was starving. Like, I couldn't get enough food, but the problem was every time I'd eat, then I would have reactions. And so it was really tricky to just find that balance of getting enough food and what to eat so that I could maintain my weight. And so in a matter of a couple months, I was down to 91, 92 pounds.
Wow.
And so when I went to that doctor and he put me on the paleo, I tried to explain to him this was not a normal weight for me. That's underweight for my height. And I didn't feel healthy and I was really weak. And he just thought I was like a thinner person, which that's too thin. So I continued to struggle trying to maintain my weight. At some point, I was eating about 2 pounds of meat a day, plus some fruit, or I would lose about 2 pounds. So it was almost like I was just barely, eating enough to maintain just that. If I couldn't ever get back up, I kept thinking I'd be able to eat enough to get back up, to my normal weight. But so anyway, at some point when I finally got the hives under control with the quercetin, I'm still searching for answers, right? And this whole time I've been praying for answers to find information that would be helpful. And so I came across some information about how you can kind of reset your immune system with the fast. And I did fast regularly. I've been fasting regularly for years, only because it helped me with yet another thing that I haven't discussed that started when I was 29. There's another issue that I'll share in a minute, but it does tie in. So I did a 3-day fast, and it was very intense. And at that point, after that, I got down to 87 pounds because of the fast. But it did reset something because my thyroid seemed to be more normal after that. I didn't have the intense hunger, and I was able to slowly start making my way back up to a normal weight. So I don't know exactly what happened, but I just know that it was beneficial, even though it was very difficult at that time. So going back to, let me just briefly talk about that. When I was 29, it's kind of, I call them allergy episodes just because I don't have a better name for them, but they were essentially like having the flu. Like I would have the symptoms of the flu. And I thought at first I kept getting the flu, but I mean, you can't get the flu every 6 weeks, you know, there's something else that's going on. And so I didn't get them every 6 weeks, but sometimes it was as short as 6 weeks. And sometimes it would be a few months. But it was very difficult because it was very painful. And like my head, migraine, head, face pain, teeth pain, swollen like lymph nodes, severe congestion. I couldn't sleep, like 104 fever. And when it first started happening, I went to the doctor, like, well, if you have a fever, you know, you're sick. You've got a virus. And I thought it was, but for 20 years I had those. Nobody in my house ever got them. And I did one time actually get the real flu. I got checked and it was real flu. And it wasn't nearly as bad as these allergy episodes. As I for lack of a better word, it's hard to explain what they are and what happened, and I couldn't ever really get a doctor to understand what I was going through with that. And so the biggest and best way to really deal with them was to prevent them. And the best way to prevent them was, if I ever started to feel like, oh no, it's coming on, like I'm starting to feel, you know, some effects of what may be about to start, I would fast, because if I didn't fast, then it was much more severe. So I had been fasting off and on for years because of these issues. So my one doctor who gave me the quercetin said, well, if fasting helps you, then go ahead and keep fasting. So I continue to do, you know, periodic fasting just to help, because it was almost like it gave my body a little bit of a reset. Like it was just too full. And so then this allowed the levels to subside, you know.
Your story, as I mentioned earlier, Decedra, and mine are so similar in our journeys. And folks know from listening to my story that when I was really sick, I started reacting to everything. Foods, scents, couldn't light a candle, couldn't have perfume, laundry detergents, certain toothpaste. I had burning tongue syndrome, which is this, and I had to go to the doctor. They gave me this mouthwash that didn't help at all, but it literally felt like my mouth was on fire all the time. I ended up finding Annie Hopper and her DNRS, which is a neural retraining system, to try and help, because I had found these stories of these folks healing these sensitivities, specifically chemical ones. And to be honest, it did. It took my mind off the pain that was in my body. I had fibromyalgia. I could not get out of bed. And you said something really profound in your email to me with your bio, Decedra, and that was, you felt like you were becoming allergic to life. I so align with what you're saying, because I just was getting so frustrated that I was eliminating this and trying this and getting blood tests for this, and nothing was working. Tell the folks, what you were reacting to toothpaste and cleaning products as well at your worst, weren't you?
Yes, yes. And after the paleo diet, after these things happened, the fasting, that's what was the next phase. Like I at this point, I should say, started becoming allergic to toothpaste and deodorant and all my hair products. I had to stop using. I stopped using pretty much everything. I loved perfume. I wore perfume, you know, all the time. And you know, all of the household scents, cleaning products, like everything. I was using baking soda I could tolerate, and so I used that as toothpaste, and I used that as deodorant. And but like, even like you say, all the scents, absolutely. Like that was, you go into somebody's house. I would go to my neighbor's house, for example. I'd be there 5 minutes. I'd come back and I'd be sick for 24 hours, like just feel terrible, just like be in bed, couldn't get up, like you say, just, it's just terrible. And you just feel like you need to live in a bubble because like, you're becoming allergic to life because everywhere you go, you're reacting to everything.
I know you're about to tell this, but I just want to tie into my own story really quickly. And is this stage where I had found Annie Hopper and realized that there is connection between our brain, what's happening to our brain, also the food that we're eating. And I just started Googling because at that time I was a strict vegan, eating super high oxalate amounts of foods, trying to what I thought was detox my body of all these horrible things. Meanwhile, because of our similarities in antibiotic use many years prior and lots of antibiotics on my side, my gut was a wreck. My digestion was completely a mess. And I was at my wit's end. I just started Googling online and just searching for can plants be harmful to you? And that's when I came across Sally's presentation. So I'm going to just finish there and let you get into where we turn the corner on your health now, please, Decedra.
Ultimately, I it's fascinating to me, like we said, like the overlap. It's amazing. Yeah. So I feel like at that point, I came across and felt like I did have a histamine problem, but I didn't really know. It was just kind of me suspecting, and so I was still trying to figure that out. And I continued to get worse with the chemical sensitivities, and really, it didn't start to turn the corner until I got really bad. I would say it really honestly was just despair. I really don't know a better word for it because I just felt like I was being painted into a corner. I mean, I was running out of food options. My food had gotten down really low, what I could eat. And I just continued to seem to be gaining more sensitivities or reactions and not getting any better. And so at some point, honestly, I just cried out to the Lord and I just prayed. And after I prayed, I went back to my iPad and I started searching again. And I found an article that linked histamine intolerance with salicylate sensitivity. And I'm like, what? Salicylate. I mess up that word all the time. Salicylate sensitivity. Like I know salicylic acid is aspirin, and I am allergic to aspirin. I'm allergic to all NSAIDs. So the only pain reliever I could use all those years was just Tylenol, which I had become immune to, and it was ineffective. And so I knew a little bit about that. But I'm like, what I didn't know is that salicylates not only are they in all plants, right? They are in all products. Like they're in preservatives. That's why meats were even bothering me. I mean, they're in so many things. They're ubiquitous, as much as oxalates are. So I will say I was excited about this piece of the puzzle, but I didn't know. I did start eliminating that salicylates and there's a company called Clure that I started buying things from because it's salicylate free. And so that was helpful, but it's still, I just knew there was something else. There was a missing piece. And so I had the chemical sensitivities too, that like you said, like all the scents everywhere I went, we went unscented everything. I stopped using a ton of chemicals, complete overhaul of your life, right? In terms of personal products and everything else. At some point, I have to say this. So this was one of the other pivotal things was this is the point I was going to make that you talked about earlier. It was just a casual comment. So Elliot Overton in the UK had some information about oxalates. Okay, So it was a casual comment on one of his podcasts. And he just said, some people who have oxalate issues even have the sensation of chewing on glass. That had happened to me. I thought my food was like somebody had put something in my food. I mean, I had in a chicken of all things. I had chewed on a piece of chicken that I had cooked myself. And I spit it out. It was as if glass shards were inside the chicken. And so this was earlier, but it always stuck with me because I'm like, that is not right. Something is going on, right? And that was the only time I ever came across that information. It was just one sentence in the middle of this video. And I was like, oh my goodness, it's oxalate. And I had completely written off oxalate because I came across some misinformation 3 years earlier, actually, that said if you don't have kidney stones, you don't have an oxalate problem. And so I didn't have kidney stones. So I'm like, okay, I guess it's not oxalate, right? And I was just like, oh, you got to be kidding me. So now the good part was I had already taken out a lot of fruits and vegetables and nuts and seeds and stuff because I just couldn't tolerate them. But okay, crazy thing is like I'm still going back to sweet potatoes. I'm like, oh, well, they're good for me, right? Like not knowing this was before I found like the oxalate piece of it for sure. And so I was still eating things because like they were healthy, right? And like that's part of the reason I got in this place to begin with, because that period between 42 and 47, I really doubled down like, okay, traditional medicine can't help me with this chronic illness, but like let's go like attack it from, multiple modalities. And I'm gonna change the way I eat. I'm gonna eat extra healthy, lots of fruits and vegetables. And I really backed off the meat because meat's bad. And so I was not vegetarian, but I definitely did not prioritize animal protein. And I look back at that now and I'm like, oh, that's definitely a problem. I was eating a lot of spinach, of beans, of almonds, sweet potatoes, blackberries, all the high oxalate foods in the attempt to get healthy, right? Like I had the right like goal in mind, but like I was so wrong. And I didn't know. So anyway, once I found out about the oxalate, I went low oxalate about 19 months ago. It's about a year and a half ago now. And I tried to do what Sally did about tapering off slowly. And apparently I didn't do it slowly enough. It was, I had some severe symptoms and you kind of have to work your way through those things. But I did feel like had finally found the root cause though. I mean, once I learned about oxalate, I so appreciate Sally putting out this book, Toxic Superfoods, because it's such a good resource, for people, right? Like it's been so helpful, and especially in a space where there wasn't anything, But I'm still learning. I'm still, it became a passion for me because I got so sick and I felt so bad that like that's all I could think about. And so I've done a lot of learning and a lot of research, and I know so much more than I used to, but I know there's still so much more for me to learn. But I do want to say one other thing that I just feel like that to me, all of this is an answered prayer for me personally because of my faith in Christ. I feel like finding this information, all the people, that we've talked about, you and Sally and Monique and everyone working so hard to get the word out and help people know so that people don't have to suffer needlessly, has just been huge.
Wow. Decedra, what you have gone through and where you are now, what an incredible journey and what a powerful one for our listeners to be able to take in, all puns intended, digest properly, and just realize, again, you so eloquently put it, looking through the lens now of what we know, and thanks to Sally and Monique and we stand on the shoulders of giants, as we like to say here, and God bless Sally for putting out the book. You're right, absolutely correct, because now we have a hard copy resources of things that we can go and look when online resources may not be available. You can go to the chapter. I just posted something the other day and look to see what the higher oxalate foods are and how you can lower slowly and to stop the dumping symptoms. Decedra, you said again, and I keep going back to that wonderful bio that you sent me, and I read it and I was like, I am so excited to chat to this lady because we share so many similar things. And folks will notice the thumbnail when this episode comes out. And you said that oxalates were the hurricane that spun off all the other sensitivities for you. And I just wonder now, knowing what you know, what you meant by that when you wrote that, because it's really powerful. It's so true too.
Well, just in that, like you go back when you look at the root cause. And so, like I said, since I'm a native Floridian, I think in terms of hurricanes, because we live with them our whole lives. And so it always fascinated me that we don't usually get tornadoes here, but when a hurricane comes through, we do. That's when we have to deal with not only the hurricane, but the tornadoes. And it's the same way with oxalates. If I hadn't have had this oxalate problem, I don't believe I would have had these other issues. I don't believe I would have had the salicylate sensitivity and the histamine intolerance and the food intolerances and the chemical sensitivities. Definitely not the same degree. So And I know Sally said oxalate causes those. And so in the same way that hurricanes in Florida create these tornadoes, that's the way oxalates created these other issues, secondary issues for me that are really, it's taken over. I mean, it's because of oxalates, but you have to put a lot of your attention into that because they force you to.
Let's leave the folks now with hopefully, again, all puns intended, a little bit of hope. What things have you seen improve for you by going low oxalate for the past, did you say a year and a half now, approximately?
Yes,
Have
yes.
you noticed some benefits? Are you able to add anything back in? What does your diet look like these days?
So my diet is still quite restricted, and I am a little different. Like I do prioritize animal foods and prioritize animal protein specifically, but I do have to have some oxalates. And because of the histamine and salicylate issues, I there's not a lot of other things that I put in. I have to have something, otherwise I just dump too quickly, So I have to have something. And so one of the things I do is I will have like some sourdough bread, and I know that's high in histamine, but I try to find like have a small budget, and so I just try to balance that. So I eat a lot of eggs, though. I try to get quality meat and eggs, and I do eat a lot of that. And I feel like overall, one of the biggest benefits of changing my diet is a lot less anxiety. I definitely have seen improvements with, like, I was having a lot of bladder pain, bladder urgency. That's all gone. I have a lot less GI issues, a lot less joint pain, a lot less physical pain from headaches, etc. I had struggled with so many headaches over the years. I don't have the face pain and teeth pain. Most of that stuff is gone most of the time now, and I would say I have just a lot happier days because I'm not hurting nearly the way I was. So I know that it is a journey and it's a process. I know, like Sally said, she's been doing it for many years now, so I know I have a ways to go and there will be some ups and downs, but I'm so thankful for the progress that's been made. And like I said, like I feel like this was one of the things is being able to get to the point where I'm working from building up from the foundation, right? And so I know there's not more to dig down into to discover. I'm like, okay, I know this is it. So now let's work from here. So I do want to mention one thing though. Lymphatic massage has been something that I've learned about in 3 months now. And I have been pleasantly surprised how beneficial this has been for me for my chemical sensitivities. I have been able to, like all of the Christmas season, I typically have to stay away from things because of all of the smells and scents and candles and plugins and all these things. And I was around a lot of stuff this Christmas, and I just would make sure I did my lymphatic massage. And I would say, I don't know, 75% reduction in symptoms. I mean, it was marked. I mean, it was significant. And so that's something that I have been working on, and that's been very helpful with that. So,
That's a great tip, Decidra. Thank you for that. I will say from my own experience and speaking with Sally directly is that people should really, as I always advocate for, experiment on yourself. Make sure whatever you're adding or subtracting, you go slowly so that you can let your body adjust and don't, like I did, like the crazy lunatic I did, go super low oxalate, like zero when I first started, because I'm like, right, these are things have caused me all this pain. I want them out. I'm not.
yes,
And I reached out to Sally because I was in a world of hurt. I thought everything was coming back again because for a while there, when I started carnivore, I felt amazing. Like I was like the honeymoon period, and then the dumping hit. So now I include a little bit of fruit in my diet. I still drink a little coffee, which seems to help me for some reason. I know coffee's not particularly high in oxalate, but yeah, for many people, Sally says, and I found this, Decidra, was that when I went to get massage, it actually seemed to hurt me more. Now, these weren't lymphatic massages, but I think she said, when you move that fascia, it can also release some of the stored oxalate. So I kept going, hoping massages would help the pain. I actually felt worse coming out of them for a while. Not so much recently that I'm a couple years into this journey, but initially, just so the listeners know, if you're dealing with severe oxalate toxicity like Decedra and I are, that at the beginning stages that can happen. But again, experiment on yourself. One thing I also wanted to highlight was the anxiety. And oh boy, the severe anxiety that I had, not only, as you say, because you were fearing that you would have another case of anaphylaxis coming on at any juncture, you were losing weight like me terribly. I was severely emaciated and malnourished. But the way that oxalates affect our brain as well, that people don't understand, this is a neurotoxin as well. I mean, not just a toxin for your body, but also for your brain. So it gets up into the brain and really can affect your thought, the brain fog, and the anxiety I had and the depression that I had. So I'm so glad to hear that you've had relief on that end too, because that is a huge thing. And I always talk about that being the surprising benefit for me of going low oxalate and mostly carnivore.
Agreed. Absolutely. 100%.
Decidre, this has been an incredible, incredible conversation that I know is going to be so helpful for so many people. Is there anything else that you want to leave our listeners with in terms of your experience, what you've been through, what people should look out for, and to just give people some pointers as they embark potentially on some low oxalate style eating or looking into oxalates? What do you suggest for folks?
I do tell people as much as possible. Like if I like had a neighbor the other day, she was having a lot of issues, and I just asked, I said, "Do you by chance eat much spinach?" She said, "Oh yeah, I eat spinach every day." And so, I just, hey, you might want to look into this. And I I loaned her my book of toxic super, my book Toxic Superfoods. So it's just, I know it's counterculture, and so I get it that people aren't always ready to embrace it, that vegetables could actually be harming them, and fruits, plants could be harming them. It took me a little while to wrap my head around, but I try to encourage people, also people that I do, like if they have symptoms similar to mine, or if they have, kidney stones, whatever, I bring up oxalate and just ask them to at least check into it, consider it, because it is difficult when you have been told for so long that this is the secret to health, right? Is going vegetarian or vegan or whatever, that this is going to solve all your health woes, right? Like it's hard to do a 180, right? And like reverse the way you think about these things. So I get it, but all I say is if they keep an open mind and really get, at the very least, even if you don't agree with it, just read about it and find out, because you never know what symptoms they might talk about, that then you can see, oh, wow, I have that, I've experienced that. And then you might be able to get some help that you've been looking for. So
sage advice coming from someone like myself with experience. And as Jeannie, the low ox grandma on Instagram often talks about, we need to become oxalate evangelists. And that's what she
yes,
describes herself as.
right.
And thank you so much, Decedra, for joining me today and getting the word out there and being brave enough to share your story. It's been an absolute honor and a privilege to chat with you. And I wish you the very best as you continue on your healing journey, and just want to say thank you again.
Well, I appreciate this so much, James. It really was a privilege for me. And I thank you so much for letting me share.
You're most welcome. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
You too. Thanks. Bye-bye.
And that's a wrap on this episode of Carnivorist Chats. If you've made it this far, I want to say thank you for listening, and also thank you in advance for liking, subscribing, or sharing this episode. Thanks again to Equip Foods, Carnivore Snacks, and the Carnivore Bar. Don't forget to check the link in the show notes to get a discount on their products. Until the next time, be well,